A principal called a father and said one sentence that would destroy his son's life if it were true. Your son brought a weapon to school. The father's entire body went cold. His mind raced. His heart pounded. This was his worst nightmare. But then the principal described what the weapon was. And the father realized the principal had made a catastrophic mistake. Not just a mistake. A dangerous lie that could traumatize an innocent child and ruin his academic future. What this father did in response, how he defended his son publicly, went viral. By the end of the day, over 100 million people had seen it. The principal was forced to resign, and the entire nation was talking about how schools need to rethink their approach to zero-tolerance policies. Marcus Johnson was a single father raising his 12-year-old son, David. Marcus worked as an engineer and was deeply involved in David's life. He attended every school event. He helped with homework. He was present and loving. David was a good kid. He got good grades. He had friends. He participated in sports. He was thoughtful and kind. He was exactly the kind of child every parent hopes to raise. The school, Lincoln Middle School, had implemented a strict zero-tolerance weapons policy. The policy stated that any object that could be considered a weapon would result in immediate expulsion. No questions asked. No exceptions. No consideration of context. This policy had been created after several school safety concerns, and while well-intentioned, it had become dangerously rigid. It didn't allow for judgment or common sense. It just said, weapon equals expulsion. On a Tuesday morning, David was going to school like any other day. Marcus made him breakfast. They talked about his day. Everything was normal. David arrived at school. He went to his classroom. Nothing seemed wrong. Then, during third period, the principal's office called for David. He was pulled from class. David was terrified. He didn't know what he'd done wrong. He didn't know why he was being sent to the principal's office. The principal, Dr. Harold Stevens, was waiting for him with 2 security guards. David, Dr. Stevens said sternly, "We need to search your backpack." "Why?" David asked, confused and frightened. "We have reason to believe you brought something dangerous to school," Dr. Stevens said. The security guards opened David's backpack and began searching it. Inside, they found David's woodworking project. David was taking a woodworking class as an elective. His assignment was to create something from wood. David had chosen to make a small wooden sword, just a practice sword carved from pine wood, completely harmless. It wasn't sharp. It couldn't cut anyone. It was smooth and blunt. It was literally just a piece of carved wood, a toy. Something a child might create in a woodworking class. But Dr. Stevens held it up and declared it a weapon. Dr. Stevens called Marcus and delivered the devastating sentence, "Your son brought a weapon to school." Marcus felt his heart stop. But before he panicked, he asked a critical question. "What weapon?" Dr. Stevens explained that David had brought a wooden sword from his woodworking class. "A wooden sword?" Marcus asked, confused. "From his class project? We classify any object that could be used to harm someone as a weapon," Dr. Stevens explained. "The sword violates our zero-tolerance weapons policy. David is being expelled immediately pending a formal hearing." Marcus asked to see the object. When he arrived at the school, he saw David's woodworking project. A smooth, harmless piece of carved wood. A child's toy. Something that couldn't harm anyone. "This is a woodworking project," Marcus said firmly. "This is not a weapon. This is a school assignment." "Regardless," Dr. Stevens said, "our policy is clear. Any object that could potentially be used as a weapon is also a wooden spoon," Marcus interrupted. "Is also a pencil, is also a ruler. Everything can potentially be used as a weapon if you're being absurd about it. This is clearly a woodworking project. This is clearly innocent. This is clearly not a threat," but Dr. Stevens wouldn't budge. He was going to stick to his rigid interpretation of the policy. David was expelled. Marcus was furious. His innocent child was being punished for doing an assigned homework project. The school was taking a zero-tolerance policy that was designed to protect students and weaponizing it against them. That's when Marcus decided to do something nobody expected. He decided to document the entire situation and post it online. Marcus took photos of the wooden sword. He took photos of David's woodworking assignment sheet from his teacher, showing that the teacher had assigned this project and that David's work was excellent. Then Marcus wrote a detailed post explaining what had happened. He explained how his innocent son had been expelled for doing his homework. He explained how the principal had labeled a child's school project a weapon. He explained the absurdity of zero-tolerance policies that don't allow for common sense or context. Marcus posted the photos and the story on social media. Within hours, the post had been shared over 5 million times. News outlets picked it up. Wooden sword expulsion started trending. People across the country were outraged. Teachers were appalled. Parents were outraged. Even law enforcement weighed in, saying the wooden sword was clearly not a weapon and the expulsion was unjustified. The school's phone lines were flooded with calls. Parents demanded to know if their own children could be expelled for similar absurd reasons. The superintendent of the district was forced to respond. She issued a statement saying the decision to expel David was under review. Within 48 hours of the viral post, the superintendent announced that David's expulsion was being overturned. The wooden sword was deemed not a weapon. The expulsion was reversed. But the damage to Dr. Stevens' reputation was done. News outlets investigated his administration of the school. They found other cases where he'd made questionable disciplinary decisions. They found evidence that his rigid application of zero-tolerance policies had hurt other students. Dr. Stevens resigned from his position within a week. He couldn't survive the public scrutiny and the loss of community trust. The school district launched a comprehensive review of its zero-tolerance policies. They realized that while safety was important, they needed to allow for judgment, common sense, and context. They revised their policies to require that objects be actually dangerous, not just potentially dangerous in someone's imagination. The district implemented new training for administrators about appropriate discipline and when zero-tolerance policies should actually be applied. Marcus's viral post sparked a national conversation about zero-tolerance policies in schools. Other districts began examining their own policies. Other parents came forward with stories of their own children being punished under absurd zero-tolerance applications. News organizations did investigations into zero-tolerance policies across the country. They found countless stories similar to David's. Children punished for harmless objects or actions because administrators were too rigid to apply common sense. Congress held hearings about zero-tolerance policies in schools. Education experts testified about how these policies disproportionately harm minority students and students with disabilities. They testified about how rigid policies actually harm school safety by creating distrust between students and administrators. As a result of these hearings and the national conversation, the Department of Education issued new guidance recommending that schools move away from pure zero-tolerance policies and instead implement discipline systems that allowed for judgment and context. David recovered from his trauma. He continued his woodworking class. He finished his project and received an excellent grade. His grades remained good. He remained a good student and a good person. More importantly, David learned an important lesson: that standing up for what's right matters, and that sometimes one person's willingness to speak up can create change that helps many people. Marcus was invited to speak at education conferences about his experience. He talked about the importance of common sense in school discipline. He talked about how parents need to be advocates for their children when systems fail. Teachers across the country reached out to Marcus to thank him for sparking a conversation that would protect their students from unfair punishment. Years later, David became a teacher himself. He became an advocate for fair discipline and age-appropriate consequences. He often referenced his father's public defense of him as inspiration for standing up against injustice. Marcus's viral post became a case study in education schools about how zero-tolerance policies can fail when applied without common sense or context. It became an example of why schools need to maintain humanity in their discipline systems. The wooden sword that had nearly destroyed David's academic future became a symbol of the dangers of rigid, inflexible thinking. It became a reminder that context matters, common sense matters, and one person with courage can change systems that affect millions of children. The profound lesson is simple but powerful. Zero-tolerance policies sound good in theory. No exceptions, perfect safety. But in practice, they often harm innocent people and create injustice. True safety comes from having wise, thoughtful adults making informed decisions, not from rigid rules that don't allow for human judgment. David's wooden sword was harmless, but the system that tried to destroy him for it was genuinely dangerous. When Marcus stood up and spoke the truth, he didn't just save his own son, he protected countless other children from similar injustice. That's what courage looks like, not dramatic action, but quiet truth-telling that demands change. This story reveals an important truth. Zero-tolerance policies sound fair, but they're often the opposite of fair. They punish innocent people. They don't allow for common sense. They harm the very students they claim to protect. Marcus's willingness to publicly expose the absurdity of his son's expulsion created change that affected school discipline policies nationwide. Have you ever witnessed unfair punishment? Have you ever seen someone stand up against an unjust system? Have you ever experienced the power of speaking the truth publicly? Like this video and subscribe to our channel for more shocking stories about injustice being exposed, truth prevailing, and one person's courage creating systemic change. Hit that notification bell right now so you never miss our latest uploads. Comment below. Tell us about a time when you or someone you know experienced an unfair decision from a school, employer, or institution. Or share about a moment when speaking the truth publicly created change. Your story could inspire thousands of people to stand up against injustice. Thanks for watching. Marcus and David's story reminds us that sometimes the greatest threats come not from what students bring to school, but from the systems we've created to keep them safe. When those systems become rigid and lose their humanity, they become dangerous. Marcus showed that one person with courage, with a phone and a willingness to speak truth, can challenge unjust systems and create change that protects millions of people. If you see injustice happening in your child's school or any institution, speak up, document it, share it, demand accountability. You might create the change that protects not just your child, but countless others. See you in the next video where we'll share another incredible story about truth triumphing over injustice.